Hi, and welcome to Dubber and Mobius. My name is Andy Lark. I'm joining you from Melbourne in Australia, and with me is Andy Faulkner, who's a Director of Customer Success for Mobius in the UK. Now, we know your time is really valuable, so we're going to try and keep this to about 40 minutes, not much longer. There'll be time for questions at the end, so the best way to drop us questions as we go through today is straight into your GoToMeeting little question bar there, and we will get to them. A few folks have sent us some questions in advance, so we will also touch on those towards the end as well. So, as it's titled, today's session really is to give you an update on how leading financial services organizations around the world are tackling this core issue of compliance uncertainty. And compliance uncertainty is sort of not something that people like to hear about, particularly in financial services, because we like to be deadly certain, but the world sort of changed, not just at the start of last year, but has been changing nonstop for a number of years. And these are just a few of the drivers, and they sort of multiply each other and create ever-increasing cost and complexity in financial services. Nearly every major financial services institution we work with globally isn't dealing with the regulations of one country. They're dealing with multi-geography regulatory demands across regulators, reserve banks, consumer watchdogs, and indeed other parties who are looking at how they're behaving and acting. But what COVID did was it really amplified a trend towards multi-channel, multi-endpoint communications. Not so long ago, I used to walk into big banks, and mobile phones would have to be checked at doors because that was the standard for all employees. Communications were restricted to SIP trunk lines. Today, those same banks are embracing UC communications, whether that's Zoom, whether it's Microsoft Teams, Cisco WebEx, as fast as they possibly can. They're embracing multi-point chat solutions, whether that was in the browser or on the mobile. And they're certainly now arming their employees to communicate with customers over mobile. And what the challenge that poses is suddenly the sort of the compliance jigsaw becomes unglued, because now capturing conversations as they occur across those touch points, which is required by most of the compliance mandates in the market today, becomes exponentially more difficult, which reduces your time to knowing, reduces your ability to know the customer, and as investigation demands continue to increase, your time to responding to regulators actually increases rather than decreases. Much of the challenges we see these organizations facing globally that they come to us and ask us to solve for them also centers on the notion that just as communications has dispersed across this broad spectrum of endpoints, so is the data. Data is trapped in application silos. It's trapped in different systems of record. They could be CRM systems, small data ponds versus lakes. And you've got this inevitable unified comms and messaging creep going on across the organization. And there's clear consciousness in financial services in particular, but also other regulated industries, that simply hitting a record button inside a UC platform, such as Zoom or such as Teams, that embedded inside the app record function immediately puts you at risk from a compliance standpoint, because you aren't often recording in alignment with privacy and efficacy laws. You're not also able to restrict and constrain access to sensitive data. Could be credit card information, could be customer information. And so your risk mitigation then just has to ever expand to accommodate it. So this compliance chasm that we talk about is a very, very real phenomenon, and leading financial services organizations have moved very, very quickly to close it. But around the world today, many haven't, and many are working hard and fast to not just address the new work from anywhere phenomenon we're all existing in right now, but also this notion of communicate from anything phenomenon, which has been driven not just by the business, but the employees themselves. And this is even more important when you consider that about 80% of all crucial conversations are actually based on voice and augmented digital communications. An advisor having a conversation with a customer and then texting or communicating additional insights to them. A mortgage broker having a conversation on a mobile phone from a property, and then messaging and communicating with them. Communications aren't binary. We tend to communicate across a range of different devices and means, but still today, 80% of those crucial conversations are typically voice-based. Unfortunately, less than 10% of those crucial conversations are captured, and it never ceases to amaze me the number of large financial institutions I go into who will tell me, oh, we already record all the conversations going on in our call center, and they don't quite understand that they're actually largely sampling conversations in a call center, and where they were capturing 100%, the vast majority of those conversations were dumped and deleted at the end of a working week because they simply didn't have the capacity to retain them for 7 years. Which then gets amplified also when I'd say to those same executives, but you do understand that more than 50% of your customer communications happen outside of your call center. And in fact, the customer communication is not the only compliance investigation starting point. So more recently, in talking to a financial institution, their concern was not just how do I record customer conversations, but how do I record conversations that involve coaching and training of employees, HR conversations with employees where regulatory issues has arisen, and then how could I reuse content to better enforce standards across the business? So it's not just the call center. What we're talking about today is this phenomenon that the regulators, the reserve banks and others are driving, that you must be able to capture every conversation, both internal and external, that is relevant to a regulatory matter. And that only accelerates when you consider that 61% of financial services CFOs want remote from work to be permanent for roles that allow it. And many of those roles, whether they're advisors, whether they're mortgage brokers, insurers, offering insurance advice, for instance, they don't necessarily need to be in the office, but those conversations have to be captured. So the legacy construct around conversational capture, where it was a dedicated SIP trunk line coming into a building, go away, and are replaced by a new world where suddenly the mobile is dominant, along with this new generation of UC platforms, not just video platforms, but chat, messaging, and a broad spectrum of others. Now, what am I seeing here, Gene? You can't see the slides. Well, that's not good. Can you see the slides now, Gene?
There we go.
I'll leave it like that. I don't know why you can't see the slides, but anyway. So, and you'll have a copy of these slides afterwards. You haven't missed much. So, when you look down the spectrum of the regulations out there, and I'm giving you a sample here that exists within the UK and outside of the UK, nearly every one of these has got the requirement for unified call recording and conversation capture mandated in them in some form or another. But crucially, most large financial institutions globally aren't looking to build discrete solutions by geography. So I'm sure Andy will talk a bit about this when we come to the Q&A section. We were just talking about his long and successful career at HSBC. I see that in the banks, even in Australia, with big Australian brands who aren't dealing with just with trading turrets sitting in Sydney. Those same turrets are mirrored in Hong Kong, in London, in New York. So they're all subject to multi-domain regulations. But these regulations really extend beyond the obvious recording and capture. They span to capture and retention. Often up to 7 years now as a standard, particularly for PCI compliance. Data discoverability and protection becomes crucial. So the same data set being used in the call center or in a sales operation has to be mirrored and protected for compliance purposes. Response times, with regulators now suggesting 2 to 4 days is the minimum standard, and it's just simply not possible with a lot of the historical legacy solutions. This notion of not just knowing the customer, but having proof of good and quality conversations. And this is where we often talk about this idea of ending not knowing. This idea that you have to understand and know that good advice or quality advice was proffered, so that you're meeting your best interest obligations. And embedded nearly in every regulation is this sort of cornerstone knowledge that you have to be able to show that you proffered good and quality communications. And it's interesting, some of these, particularly FINRA and some of the FCA advice, when you look at a solution proffered by a Dubber and a Mobius together in the market, it really gets at this notion of you being able to provide evidence that that quality of communication was enriched by voice, complemented by other forms of communication. That's what the regulator's looking for. And obviously it spans down to security, fraud protection, and reporting on suspicious activity. So it's interesting when you dig under the skin of these regulations and you actually start looking at what's in them. And this is just an example of FINRA is a great example. I'm showing you examples from around the world just because I think when you look at them, you can see, country by country, the regulators are mirroring standards elsewhere. They're actually quite similar right across the board. Sort of who got it right first gets copied again. But you can see here the depth and extent that they're looking for in solutions. And there was definitely a pause at the start of COVID where people like the FCA in the UK did give people a break. They did let people not necessarily have to record or provide evidence of recording. Whereas now that holiday is over and they're back to being very determined about every conversation being captured in the network and able to be provided as evidence of meeting compliance standards. So when you look at the basic approach to continuous compliance, and this notion of continuous compliance is really important because it goes beyond the idea of, look, I just need to capture some data for some investigations that as I need them. It's really this notion of how do I build a healthy compliance environment in a financial services firm. And there are almost no major financial services firm who don't want to embrace that concept that I've encountered at least. But the first crucial aspect is capture. And legacy solutions that have been based upon legacy applications or siloed within applications or based upon just simple fixed line capture with on-premise hardware and storage, those days are over. There is no question this shift to the cloud with infinitely scalable storage, with recording and capture occurring in the network. And if you like these firewalled application suites such as Mobius provides, enabling flexible communications across many different formats to occur are the future. So this notion of getting the capture right so that you can critically prove you did everything you possibly could to capture everything going on. There is just no reason not to. Storage is infinitely available at a fraction of the cost of traditional solutions. The second thing is this notion of the voice intelligence cloud. And one thing I'd encourage you to think about that we see the leading financial services organizations embracing is this notion that there's this great saying, data is the new oil. And my argument is to them that voice data is the largest untapped, and conversational data is the largest untapped oil field out there, because largely it was unaddressable. There was no way you could record every conversation occurring on your network. Well, today you can record every conversation, every text, every message on your network at scale for cents. It's not a burden. But critically, because you're able to aggregate all that data in one place, something we call the Voice Intelligence Cloud, you can now run AI-based alerting, reporting, and search on it. And that dramatically shifts your ability to respond to investigations and take a proactive stance on interrogating data for suspicious and fraudulent activity, for misprovisioning of information. Perhaps a lender is recommending stock when they shouldn't be recommending stock, that sort of thing's going on. You can now know. You can now know, thanks to the power of AI running on these extremely large data sets. And the final thing is, what that aggregates up to is real insights that you know your customer, you know what your customer satisfaction is, you know what your employee satisfaction is, and you're dynamically able to provide that back to the business in real time. So this basic view looks simple, but has to be backed with absolutely world-class technology to make it happen, because you're looking to do this at incredible scale and incredible volume. So when we then look at what happens when you do it, what happens when you're able to capture all these conversational data insights? Well, suddenly you can capture it from any endpoint or app. You can avoid the leakage and breaches that will occur if you just have everyone turning on Zoom and recording away, because every one of those recordings is leakable, it's not retainable, it's not discoverable, it's not manageable. Suddenly you've got automated surveillance running on your entire conversational base, both inside the business and outside the business. And this is really important. And talking to regulators recently, they're as interested in the conversations taking place inside the business between employees as they are in the conversations taking place between the employees and the customer. Because for them, a good chunk of breaches and compliance breaches are driven by internal activity before they even occur with the customer. And so they're very, very interested in being able to probe conversations between traders and their managers, and see what guidance and direction was being provided. So this overall picture I'm trying to paint here is not just compliance as sort of this surveillance and terrifyingly dramatic activity that has to occur in a major breach. It also provides you with the insights and the data you need to coach and train. It provides you with the ability to build these compliant, non-refutable data sets that you can use at any point in the future with automated retention and legal hold. These are all standard features of compliant and unified conversational recording and capture in any network environment. So you have to look, if you look at why Mobius and Dubber love partnering together, it simply put, Mobius enables those secure, compliant conversations to occur. We enable those secure and compliant conversations then to be captured, converted to rich data, whether it's transcriptions, pure data, keyword analytics, dashboards, and insights, and then unified in this voice intelligence cloud, so that you are finally enabling secure and compliant conversations end to end in your environment. And so, as we look across that stream I just described, one of the crucial challenges that we see most financial institutions racing to solve right now is, how do they deploy new UC solutions? How do they roll out Teams? How do they roll out Zoom? How do they roll out RingCentral? How do they roll out WebEx with these features? And our focus has been with Mobius on ensuring as they do that, we're there. We're in Zoom, we're in RingCentral, we're all standard features. We are the compliant call capture, conversational capture solution. So today we're only one of two certified for Microsoft's compliance recording solution for Teams, for instance. So it's really, really important that you look at this as not just the traditional call center or the traditional SIP trunk connection going into a large enterprise. That's your main phone line for those of you that aren't on the networking or technology side. You're also looking at it in terms of this new world of video conferencing and UC controls. So let me give you a couple of examples of how this works, and then I'm going to swing into a bit of Q&A. So if you've got questions, make sure you punch them in. So this is a great example from one of Switzerland's largest private banks. Now, the interesting thing buried in our little case study here was that this particular bank is obviously dealing with an enormous range of languages. And one of the pitfalls I see often in talking to financial services organizations is they get quite distracted with transcription. Now, we believe, at least, that we certainly provide probably the best quality transcription in the market today. And we do that through the way that we extract transcribed data and represent it to you. And having, as someone who's run large-scale call centers with thousands of people in them, my first experience of Dubber was looking at a transcription before I joined the business and going, wow, that's incredible, because I'm used to just seeing pages of endless text transcribed with no breaks, no indicators on who said what and when. But transcriptions are a commodity, frankly. You can go to Amazon, you can go to Google, you can go to IBM, everyone transcribes. But only a number of those services are able to address certain languages. So you must preserve flexibility in which transcription engines you're able to use. And this is a trap I see some financial institutions having to extract themselves right now, where they've made commitments to vendors that actually can't translate, for instance, in this case, Hebrew. So we're able to address that, but that's not really the answer of the solution here. It was that having that absolute confidence that they can identify compliance breaches immediately. And that involved rich AI running on transcribed data across around 9 target languages, with instant alerting and notifications on keywords such as "you should buy." You should buy. That phrase sends shivers down their spine. And so having that surface in real time and presented was really, really vital to them. This is another one from one of Australia's largest banks, where they needed solutions for traders and trading turrets located around the world. And more important to them was not just meeting the compliance mandates here, but being able to aggregate and store data and have confidence that at any point in the next 7 years, they had to conduct an investigation, they would have 100% of the calls captured and stored compliantly in the country of origin, because their concern was they couldn't have it all sitting in one cloud infrastructure globally. Their data requirements and regulations meant they needed highly fragmented but fully compliant data sets by region. So what I'm trying to paint a picture of here is these large financial institutions are all driven by different pain points depending on the functions within the bank that you're talking to. This is another great example of a large Asian bank who was just determined to record managers and train them for compliant texting from any device and recording of client conversations across any device. And the crucial thing for them, and we see this every single week from large banks who will call us and say, we're looking for a solution, we've heard about Mobius and Dubber, we're really, really interested. How long will it take? Could you have it done within 6 months, or will it take a year? And our answer is probably 6 days or less. And they're just astounded. And that's the advantage of network first, cloud-based, unified communications at scale, is that with a flick of a switch, you send us phone numbers or device numbers. You don't need to re-provision numbers. And this is another little thing that you must look to avoid. The legacy world that started in the call center, where you re-provision phone numbers to desk phones, doesn't work in this new world. You need to be able to just use your existing numbers, allocate them to be recorded on a network, and have them captured, recorded, whether it's text, whether it's voice, whether it's messaging from applications. And so we can do that today very, very fast. So I've tried to paint a broad picture for you of how and why financial and services institutions are sort of racing to embrace unified conversational recording and intelligence. And we were just having this conversation before we started this call, where I was reflecting on a call I had last week with a bank. He said, okay, we love this, we want to do it, we want to measure the ROI. And I said, okay, well, we'll definitely send you our ROI guide. If any of you want it, just let us know, we'll shoot you a copy of that. But my comment to them was, you're actually asking the wrong question. This is a required operational cost. This is not some fancy pixie dust we're sprinkling on the business to make it a little bit better. This is a required operating cost. So the real question is, how do you make that cost efficient and productive? And we can help you do that today by significantly lowering the existing costs within the business to do this, but doing it as a fraction of the cost of traditional approaches. Now, the other interesting thing is, when you look at what is achieved when you deploy the kind of solution we've described today from Double and Mobius, is the benefits don't end with compliance. In fact, you could largely fund doing this just on eliminating or reducing significantly your CX research costs, because we will give you customer sentiment on every call and conversation in real time. You won't be waiting 6 months for your NPS data. You won't be waiting 6 months for your customer satisfaction or employee satisfaction data. We can tell you that in real time. And it's interesting how some of the leading banks are going, wow, that's great. You could give me signals of my employee health and of my trader health on a daily basis, hour by hour. Well, simple answer is yes, we can do that within hours of deploying the solution. So the benefits are rich and really extend far beyond the obvious benefits just within compliance. So with that, let me pass over to, let me have a conversation with Andy. If you've got any questions, just drop them up. I can't see any questions popping up just yet, but we've got some questions some folks sent us, so that's good. We can get going. So Andy, hey, great to be with you tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, I thought an interesting place to start would maybe be any cases of customers or institutions you've seen in the market that have really fallen victim to not having unified conversational capture, record, and intelligence solutions in place. And you're aware of seeing.
Great question, Andy. And yeah, I think rather than me sit here and pick on anybody in particular, in case there's anybody from that organisation who would be sit there and quite offended that I've chosen them and not others, all I'd say there is just get online and have a look for regulatory breaches or compliance gaps and that sort of thing, where any one of the major, even and some of the smaller brokerages have been identified as problems with trade reconstruction or regulatory misuse, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think it's easy to be able to find it yourself, going in there and get that, rather than me sitting here and naming and shaming anybody. I'm very frequently
one of the things I like about what Mobius is doing, and this was a question I had shot across to me today, but it's one of the things I also like about Mobius is doing, is this idea that financial services institutions as a whole need to embrace this new world of unified communications, not just the Microsoft Teams and the Zooms of the world, but employees communicating on WhatsApp, new chat and messaging formats. What do you, as someone who's been in banking and sort of seen the evolution of it over a number of years, I won't say decades, otherwise you'll appear to be as old as me, but what do you see going on there as a trend? Do you see more and more institutions going, yeah, it's not just UC that we think of when we look at our screens for another Zoom call, but is it UC into WhatsApp and into all these other formats?
Yeah, sure. And if you think the likes of messaging apps, WhatsApp, WeChat, Line, etc., there's been appetite in banking to embrace those channels for many years. The appetite has been quashed by the inability to provide compliance within there, typically because they're peer-to-peer encrypted. No one could ever really kind of be able to get in there and take a good capture for compliance purposes. And from that reason, banks would always have managed by policy just saying, look, we can't use this as a tool. Just go with the tools that we can offer, voice, SMS. But what happened last year changed everything. As soon as everybody moved to being completely remote, then how could you stop anybody chatting via messaging? How could you see that anybody was chatting by messaging? Customers were wanting to be able to communicate in every single way, in any possible way that they needed to. So it really just changed the goalposts for video collaboration, for messaging collaboration. So for the likes of Movius and ourselves and Dubber as well, to be able to be in a position to offer capture capability for technologies like that, it's been brilliant. It's been the perfect answer to a lot of these challenges that banks have been facing, where they've had to embrace or quickly change their strategy and say, well, even though we have compliance gaps, we've got to go and allow these technologies very, very quickly and really play catch up immediately afterwards. So to be able to come in and discuss with them straight away on how to provide a compliance answer to their problems has been a really good message over the last 12 months.
That's great. I mean, I like what you're saying, because I do think that's what the customer wants. And rather than compliance being a barrier, by enabling compliance, we actually open the door to all these new solutions which customers are demanding, right? That they want them.
Exactly. And there's been tools in the market for many years that could do one or two of the kind of compliance answers, but never really many that could answer all or many all in one solution. Like the Dubber cloud-based recording can be deployed in many locations. Movius app recording, we can provide compliance via voice, via SMS, via WhatsApp. So to be able to offer multiple compliance solutions for people that need this on a mobile device, rather than being able to have to discuss about finding a solution to one, and then that customer then having to talk to another provider about another solution, which just becomes a disaster to try and manage, one geographically, and then two just with multiple different vendors. So the joined up response from a Movius and Dubber perspective is a real welcome message for banks to be able to take.
As you think about your time in financial services, but also now at Movius, what would you say are the crucial, real burning drivers in the compliance space within financial services, that they're actually looking to solve for, the real day-to-day pain points?
A great question. So day-to-day pain point, obviously plug your compliance gaps no matter where they are. And there's always really, for many years, been a solution for the big, large trading hubs and the big, large trading systems. So obviously hardwired voice on trade floors, recorded surveillance like CCTV, even on trade floors in the US, the UK, Hong Kong, etc. These things have been around for many, many years. But the big driving compliance issues, or the big challenges, is how do we ensure that we have that same level of provision for compliance wherever there needs to be, and that's where the big shift to be able to provide cloud-based recording, cloud-based mobile surveillance or capture has really helped answer those problems, because previously you could only really provide a sort of a compliance solution in one or two locations. Now we can say, actually, no matter where you need to have that, no matter where you've got people working, we can provide a solution that can provide the compliance answers that they're looking for.
That's great. And what would you argue was the central barrier to answering some of the compliance needs in these large banks is that you're seeing as you talk to customers today? Is it purely just complexity, or is it cost driven, or is it just capacity to take on more right now?
Another great question. If you think about where previously you would say a bank would probably look at the compliance piece and say, well, we can't really we can't be cutting costs, or we don't need to put a figure on this. It's just all we need to do is ensure that we provide compliance and avoid huge multi-million, if not multi-billion-dollar fines. It was easy to justify the cost to fix compliance gaps. That's changed. That's changed, obviously, with the economic challenges from the pandemic, that's really, banks are now really looking to cut their costs, improve their share price, and even compliance and even security. They're all having their budgets slashed. So to be able to answer them and discuss with them about more cost-effective solutions, bringing things out and away from their data centers, cutting the overheads of staff, and bringing this out to services provided via cloud and by service delivery partners, really helps them look at their overall TCO for solutions like this, where previously it wasn't such the biggest driver. Cost was never a massive driver in compliance, but it is now, just like everything else.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're seeing the same. We're having invested, even in Australia now, billions and billions and billions of dollars in addressing what was a pretty difficult environment for financial institutions. For those of you that haven't been following what happened in Australia, we had a royal commission into banking. We've had two of the major banks go through multi-billion-dollar fines, and most of the others have been hit in various ways as well. So it's been a very, very interesting time down here, and those are all very, very good quality institutions, tripped up on small technicalities and issues that they had to go and address. So we're working closely with a lot of them right now to help them ensure that doesn't happen again. And it sort of leads me to my next question for you, Andy, is sort of around, and there was a question that was also sent in, which was how much demand do you think there is within the business itself, not so much the compliance functions, but within the business itself for these solutions, where the business owner goes, yes, I actually want that data as well. And what are sort of the drivers there? Is it purely CX? Is it agent or call center efficiency? Where are you seeing the hot points within the business?
Yeah, I think for me, I think that's been the biggest shift. So obviously, my background was always within the investment bank, but a lot of my colleagues in my previous employer worked alongside contact center and end user computing, and they would always have the cool toys, the way to embrace AI, the way to embrace data, the way to use recordings for quality and purposes, and be able to use it like that. Whereas from a compliance standpoint, it was right, this is there to ensure the firm is protected. And that bottom line, those lines are very much blurred now, and to see more and more parts of the organization looking at all data, and the investment bank compliance data, not just being for compliance, but being for enrichment, and really looking at how we can provide better services for customers, but for staff as well. That's been the big shift, and it's good. It's really great to see, and it's really great to be able to do that. And only recently, our customers are starting to ask things like, can our traders and relationship managers listen to their own calls? So there's been a real culture shift in doing that. That previously would never have been considered for somebody the calls are there because they need to be recorded, not because it's there as a training tool or as an efficiency tool. That shift has happened now, and it's really, really good to see. So yeah, all the way through the organization, most parts, HR, training, all the way through management, they're really looking at this data now, whether it's there just immediately for training, but also for real kind of like more strategic decisions as well.
Yeah, it's funny. It's once people are aware of the availability of voice data and the scale it's available within the enterprise, everyone wants a slice of it. I was talking to the CMO of a major bank the other day who said, I had no idea that we were recording all that stuff. So what you're telling me is I could actually search it and it would tell me how many people mentioned our TV ad last night, or how many people mentioned the billboard on High Street, or how many people talked about our ad campaign. I'm like, yeah, let's do it right now. I'll pull it up. I'll show it to you. And she just couldn't believe it. She couldn't believe that data was sitting there. And she's like, I actually pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in research to get that data, and it's normally months too late. Now I can actually get that. It changes the way we invest. So I think the benefits are really expansive once you get this notion of your voice intelligence cloud operating at scale. It's a game changer right across the business. So I think we've used up our 40 minutes. We're 41 minutes. We really want to be respectful of people's time. Hang on, I just got a question come in here. I'm going to try and figure out how to get to it. from Scott. You mentioned we're one of 2 compliant Microsoft partners. Who is the other? The other, I believe the other could be Verint. I think the other one could be Verint. Look, we're very different than Verint. Verint's great if you're running a big call center and you need a call recording solution there. They do not offer unified call recording as we do. By that, we mean the ability with a Mobius to capture every conversation in the network and do it at a fraction of the cost. They don't offer a unified voice intelligence cloud. So we're very, very different solutions. So if you're a legacy call center sitting on Verint and you are operating Microsoft Teams and you don't want to change too much, it's pretty good. You've got a compliant solution there. But if you're actually looking to do what Dubber and Mobius are describing today, which is fully scaled, compliant call recording and conversational capture across applications, chat, messaging, all of those conversations, put them in one place and really derive intelligence and insights from them at scale, that's what we do. So quite different approaches. That's not saying you can't also continue to, we've had some customers do this, continue to use Verint in aspects of their call center, and we take the data and put it in the Dubber Voice Intelligence Cloud alongside all this beautiful, rich Mobius data and give you deep insights. So yeah, good question. I hope that was a fair answer, and feel free to drop me an email if you need more. So I just want to thank Andy Faulkner for joining us. So it's been great meeting you, Andy, and really appreciate your contribution. If you need to reach myself on any of this, if you need copies and you don't get them, you will all get copies of the presentation, or you want copies of other papers and it's too arduous filling out forms on websites, you can just drop me an email to andy.lark@dubber.net. And Andy, what's your best email for people to reach you on?
Yeah, it's andrew.faulknell@mobiuscorp.com.
Cool. That's great. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate you making the time and overcoming your Zoom or WebEx or Teams fatigue to fit us in. We're deeply grateful, and we look forward to chatting with you more, and keep an eye out for more webcasts. And do give us feedback if this was informative, useful, not useful. Tell us. We're always determined to do better every one of these we do. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.